Most of the murders I had investigated up to that were well-known criminals and everything else like that. Okay, Marlowe was a well-known criminal, but John Campbell wasn't.
Yeah.
When I walked into the house that morning, I saw him on the floor with a hole in his head. And he was lying just under the radiator. That's how David Murphy, the plumber, couldn't see him. He was like a child of 15.
The 80s had the General, the 90s had John Gilligan, and in the noughties it was the reign of Martin Marlowe Hyland. He ruled over the drug scene, working his way up the ranks, taking the opportunity to step in when others fell by the wayside. He grew increasingly reckless and paranoid and therefore became a liability. He had to go. And the circumstances of his death just added to his legacy. That an innocent young man doing an honest day's work lost his life is just terrible. You're listening to Caught in the Crossfire, Episode 6, Still Waiting for Justice. 8 months after Anthony Campbell and Marlowe Hyland were shot dead, John Mangan was arrested with a loaded Luger pistol down his trousers in the toilet of the Comet pub in Santry in North Dublin. At the time, he was on bail for 2 charges of possession of cannabis. One of the charges was for a massive drugs bust in the car park of Brown's Barn in South Dublin in July 2006. Gardaí had seized €2 million worth of hash. Both Mangan and Willie Hines were arrested close to the scene. In August the following year, when Mangan was arrested again at the pub in Santry, he told Gardaí his life had been threatened between 8 and 10 times and that he was only carrying the pistol for his safety. After a dramatic criminal trial in November 2009, John Mangan was sentenced to 14 years in jail for gun and drug charges, while Willie Hines got 12 years. Both are now free men. As far as the investigation into Marlowe and Anthony's murders are concerned, Gardaí say it remains a live and open investigation, and so has not been handed over to the Serious Crime Review Unit, or as it's possibly better known, the Cold Case Unit. As we've heard, it's been suspected from those very early days of the investigation that one of Marlowe's gang, Eamon the Don Dunn, was behind the hit. He was spotted sitting in a car waiting outside the house in Finglas, while his former boss was pumped with 6 bullets. Less than 4 years later, it was the Don's turn to die. The 36-year-old was murdered by a gunman in a pub in Cabra in April 2010. That's the way the crime world works. Christine Campbell had never heard of any of these men's names before Anthony's murder. It wasn't a world she moved in or was all that aware of, but as you can imagine, she knows all about them now.
And did you know who Marlowe Hyland was?
I never heard of him. Never heard nothing. And then when they were all saying it's the fox.
Yeah,
Desi O'Hare. I was like, surely. I don't...
Yeah.
I wouldn't know them because I've never mixed in that
And you
circle.
were away for a long time. You wouldn't have even heard of them in the news.
Definitely not. But I did get their names very quickly. And I did say it to the police.
Yeah?
And they said, who told you that name? I said, I can't say.
Right.
I said, but it sounds like every dog on the street knows who it was. But I didn't find out till much later.
So did you get the name Eamon Dunn? Did you get the name Johnny Mangan?
No, Willie Hines, John Mangan.
Yeah.
They were the 2 names.
And you hadn't a clue who they were?
I hadn't a clue. I've only seen John Mangan's picture 2 years ago. So when he went out on the run in 21, and I was absolutely sickened because if you don't see the face, it's kind of, you don't have to put that man in your head. But God, that made me sick because I kind of looked where it was, well, he was in his 40s. He was a father himself.
Cold cases aren't officially called cold cases. Instead, they're known as serious crime reviews. Christine is very familiar with the concept. She told me she's addicted to all those TV shows that follow seasoned investigators trying to crack decades-old crimes using the very latest of technology, and who always have SWAT teams available to take the bad guys down when the case is solved. The reality here in Ireland is a little different. Retired Chief Superintendent Christy Mangan spent 40 years in the Guards. During his career, he was involved in more than 100 murder investigations and was twice awarded the Scott Medal for bravery. He also helped to set up Ireland's first cold case unit, or as it's officially called, the Serious Crime Review Team.
Yes, the Serious Crime Review Team, which I suppose is commonly known as the Garda Cold Case Unit, was established in 2007 by the then Garda Commissioner. I had been sent in 2005 to the UK to train in the concept of cold case reviewing. So upon completion of that course, I recommended to the Garda Commissioner that the Guards, as an organisation, should introduce this concept. It wasn't a new concept. It is used hugely in the US, where there are a lot of cold case squads over there, very successful units, and then it's really embedded in the UK since the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. And their learnings from the failures that took place in that murder investigation. So we also looked at what the PSNI were doing. They had the historical inquiries team up there. We met with them. We also went to Edinburgh. We met up with the Scottish forces and down to the London Met. And I suppose one of the units that we thought, well, I certainly thought was very, very progressive was the review team that was based in Cardiff. And we, over the years, we had huge positive interactions with that unit because they obviously have had a lot of success since they were set up. We also contacted the FBI and they came over here to Ireland in 2008. They spent a week with us, training us up, training the unit up in crime scene assessment, the ritualistic and signature behaviours in modus operandis, intimate partners, homicides, serial homicides, sexual homicides, and then also they devised suspect interview strategies that we could use in tandem with the new Garda interviewing model that was been brought in at the time. So the startup period was very interesting because all of the units we dealt with were very frank. They went through not always their successes, but also the failures of the different police forces all over the world. And unfortunately, the mistakes are quite similar. So we decided that we would take the policies and procedures that they used in all of these police organisations, and we would take the best out of them, what we consider to be the best. And then we devised a policy for the Guards, because we would have to have a policy in case we were going to experience pushback from certain investigators. So the unit was established in August 2007. And then we started off basically trawling through files, databases where they existed, to try and get a handle on how many unsolved homicides actually existed within the country. So we picked a cut-off point from 1980, but and that's simply because we had to pick some decade. But we went back and, over the time that I was involved in the Serious Crime Review Team, we went back and looked at homicides. The oldest one I was involved in was the investigation into the murder of Cecilia McAvoy in 1962. She was a young 18-year-old girl who was found murdered on the Heath in Portlaoise. So that was one of the oldest that we looked at, actually. So we then started with our start-off point in 1980, looking at the unsolved homicides. And our job was to have a preliminary examination of each of the cases, because we needed to establish what had we got. Did we have... we set up what's called a weighting matrix, and that was applied in determining the prioritization of the cases for review. So if the case had fingerprint evidence, if it had DNA evidence, or maybe new witnesses were coming forward, and also that the complete investigation case papers were available and the exhibits, then it was a prime case for a review. Also, if there was new forensic opportunities or developments in science, or if we discovered that there was significant actions not taken at a particular time for whatever reason, we would follow up on them. But unfortunately, then on the lower scale, if there was no new information or evidence, no intelligence, no new forensic opportunities, or if the suspect was dead, or significant witnesses to the crime, or people who had vital information, and if they were deceased, or there was no case papers or no exhibits, well then unfortunately the case then was listed on a very low priority, and that's the way it has to be, unfortunately, because if you're going reviewing a case and putting huge amount of resources into the matter, and the suspect is dead, well, a lot of people would question, your usage of resources. So that's what we did. We identified, over in excess of 200 murders that had not been resolved for a variety of reasons. And then we started looking at some of the cases where we thought there would be a good chance of success initially. And then during that period of time, a lot of people contacted the office. They would actually email you, or maybe even wait outside the office for you, in the hope that to catch you coming or going. Retired members were absolutely brilliant. We had a lot of retired members contacted us, and some of them, they really just had a bee in their bonnet about a certain case. It wouldn't leave their mindset, and weren't satisfied with maybe the way the investigation panned out, maybe 20 years, 30 years prior to where it had been set up. So they wanted to tell us what they thought. And sometimes you would meet maybe some people who were very irate, very, very annoyed with the Garda organisation. Maybe they felt they had been treated badly, or felt the case hadn't been progressed to the standard it should have been. And basically that they hadn't been listened to. That's, they had a voice and they wanted somebody to listen to them. So often you would meet maybe with families, you certainly would meet with all the retired members, and the first maybe 45 minutes, hour is you will get pummeled, because you're representing the Garda organisation. It's not personal, certainly not personal, but it's they're venting, and you have to take it. It comes. It's a verbal assault from some people, because you're the one wearing the Garda badge, and they want action, and they want to know why you haven't taken action, or why the organisation didn't take action, and a lot of the families would have believed that the case had been forgotten about, and that it actually had gone cold. And nothing had happened in the intervening 10, 20 years or whatever period of time had elapsed. So it was important to listen to what the families had to say, including the very poor commentary they had about the Garda organisation. But then there was a lot of positives coming from the families, in that they had ideas themselves as regards who was involved in the murder and maybe what could be done, or maybe there were people that they believed in the intervening years hadn't come forward. But then, because of change of their circumstances, they may have got married, had children, or they may be facing death themselves, they may be unwell. And we met with a number of people as a result of that, because they wanted to literally unburden themselves as to what they knew about a particular case. So we got huge buy-in from the public. We recognised from the very start that the media were of huge importance to us, and how we would utilise the services of the media in order maybe from time to time to highlight a case. So you would have to develop a number of strategies. Source the original case papers. That's the very, very important thing to do. See what exhibits are there, or unfortunately, what exhibits are not there, and how critical or how important are they in a case to the success maybe of getting to a prosecution. It could be a gun, it could be a knife, it could be maybe rope that was used in the murder. And then also then looking at, is our suspect alive? Thankfully, in the majority, the suspects were alive, but unfortunately there were 2 cases that we would have examined, and unfortunately Rita Ponsford was one of them. When we went looking for her husband in the UK, he had died 2 weeks before we got there.
Right, yeah.
So time is of the essence, but the cold case review is more proactive than if you're dealing with a murder inquiry. You're very reactive. It's a very reactive situation. Also, the investigators at the time then would have been dealing with maybe multiple cases, multiple murders, and their staffing levels was very poor. Their resources were poor. So you would listen to the original. I would have always endeavoured to go out and interview the original senior investigating officer and get a good feeling for what they thought had gone well and maybe not gone so well. So you met some interesting characters, some very, very strong-willed people who simply, it was their way or no way, and they didn't believe maybe a review should take place. And even some serving members were not pro the concept of reviewing, because they felt as if it was me or the Garda organisation coming out maybe years later and marking their case and maybe being critical. And that's not the purpose of a review. The purpose of a review is to bring a case to a resolution. And we're all, you're experienced enough. If somebody's saying, well, maybe, did you look at maybe such an angle, maybe it wasn't in existence. So you're not judging the person's work with hindsight. Mm-hmm. That's the main thing. You can't put people into corners.
As Christy alluded to there, every single murder case brings with it its own set of sensitivities and issues, especially when an innocent victim is involved, like Anthony Campbell. Those investigating a case will often put their heart and their soul into trying to bring the perpetrators to justice, working long hours for months at a time, with usually very limited resources, and often while also working on other cases at the same time. Chasing every avenue they can think of to try to make sure families of those murdered can rest assured that absolutely everything was done to catch their killer. But sometimes it's just not enough. And while no one, unless they've had the misfortune to experience something similar, can ever imagine the torment Christine Campbell has lived through since Anthony was killed, there is one man who lives every day with the knowledge that despite his best efforts, the people responsible for shooting the baby-faced plumber have never served a day for their crime. And it torments him too.
I retired in July 2007. And at that particular time, just before my retirement, I was based in Blanchardstown, and that area was covering Finglas and Cabra and Blanchardstown. And I joined the Guards back in 1971, and I had 36 years service at that time. I decided to retire in 2007, but I had made my mind up in 2006. And shortly after this murder, that made my mind up.
Mm. Why was that?
Well, it was such, how would you say? It's one of those things.
That stayed with you. It just got you.
Sorry.
And I suppose...
Even now, 18 years later, most of the murders I had investigated up to that were well-known criminals and everything else like that. OK, Marlowe was a well-known criminal, but John Campbell wasn't.
Yeah.
When I walked into the house that morning, I saw him on the floor with a hole in his head. Mm. And he was lying just under the radiator. That's how the David Murphy, the plumber, couldn't see him. And he was like a child of 15. He was 20, but he didn't look it. And on top of that, like, he was an only child. So I'm not going to do this. I don't think I can.
Look, people think that guards, that investigators, that journalists, that we've
Quite hard-nosed.
hard-nosed and that we've seen it all, and it's just...
Well, I was, and I probably still am if I go to the right scene or something like that. Like, I mean, I have seen some horrendous scenes, and I've been in horrendous situations and things like that, and it never affected me. This one did.
This one did, yeah.
And it was actually what made me decide to go.
Yeah. And you know, the thing is that when I started this, talking to Christine, I mean, how many murders are there? Each one of them has family and all the trauma.
Oh, yeah.
And the generational trauma that goes with it. But, and you know, but in the media, you're covering this murder, you're covering that murder, all the rest of it. But that one stayed with me. And it was all those elements you describe. I didn't obviously have the nightmare of walking in and seeing that scene. I'm sure those images are still with me.
Oh, yeah. Still with me.
But there was something about his face, the innocence, the smiling child about to become a man.
Yeah.
You know, and the
Exactly.
idea that it was a mother's only child and she lost her only child in such
Oh, it was the cruel.
senseless.
It was really cruel. And she was a lovely woman.
Yeah.
His grandmother and his whole family, like, I mean, Christine's parents, like, I mean, and that. They were all lovely people, like, I mean, and, you know, salt of the earth. But, you know, like, I mean, it was horrendous.
Horrendous.
And it was one that we all wanted to solve, every one of us. And we put our backs and bones into it. And I know that, like, I mean, I know because I had a great crew in Blanchardstown and Finglas, like, I mean, and Cabra. And, like, I mean, the murder happened in the Finglas area, but we moved it to Blanchardstown for the, you know, to carry out the investigation because we had a room out there. And when I went out there in 2002, they had a small little room where you had one fella, like, I mean, in doing files, and within a year we were slaughtered, and they blamed me because of all the trouble that started then, like, you know, when I arrived there. And so what I did was I got this big room down at the end, and we put it into a completely sole investigation room, manned by 2 people. Like, and I had to take them off my own people, like, you know, to put in, like, I mean, to do it, like, you know. So we were actually down 2 detectives. But it was, you know, and we fought hard to get them replaced and everything else like that. Like, we couldn't, like, I mean, but you could get in what we used to call bookshees aides and that, like, you know, and they used to come in, like, you know, and they were great lads and great girls, in fairness, like, I mean, and we managed to do it, like, I mean, but, like, compared to Limerick, we were being slaughtered, and I mean slaughtered, from 2002 until I left in 2007, we were being slaughtered with murders, attempted murders, shootings, everything that you could name, like, I mean, was thrown at us. And we'd only a tiny little unit in Blanchardstown and Finglas, whereas Limerick was getting everybody.
Christy Mangan believes the case into Anthony Campbell's death could and should be reviewed. While Eamon the Don Dunn is dead, there are at least 2 other suspects now at large. And while it may not be the easiest thing for Anthony's loved ones to hear, it would also help resolve the murder of one of Dublin's most notorious criminals. Can Anthony Campbell's murder be investigated separate to Marlow Highland's murder? Or do they both? They died together, they were murdered together. Are they forever sort of linked?
Well, they are forever linked. You know, it's the one crime scene. It's the same people involved, the same getaway driver. It's a double murder investigation with 2 families.
Yeah.
So it would be, if you gleaned enough evidence in relation to the case, you know, it would be a murder charge for two people.
And it's fair to say, maybe, while every human being has a family and people who love them and people who miss them, Marlowe Hyland made choices of the world he existed in. And he probably realised that, some of the gains he made, mainly financially, could have come with the cost of losing his life. He knew that one day there could have been a bullet somewhere with his name on it, and that is likelihood of how he might die because of the life he chose to live. Anthony Campbell was a complete innocent. He was on a road to probably a bright future. He had an apprenticeship, he was starting a career, he had a loving mother and father and extended family. He was a boy really on the brink of manhood. It feels as if he should be treated differently, or, it feels unfair that they're both linked in such a way and that they would both benefit perhaps or from the same justice.
The whole case is an absolute tragedy. But as an investigator, you have to be mindful of the fact that Marlowe Hyland had a family as well. He has left behind people who are traumatised, people who no doubt want justice as well. So your approach is it's a murder of two people. Okay, the circumstances of both people are poles apart. Absolutely. One made a choice to become involved in criminality. The other was just trying to make their way in life, as an enormous amount of young people do. So as an investigator, you're there to deal with the facts, to deal with the situation you have in front of you, and not to make judgments about either parties. You may have your own private views, and the courts eventually will dispense justice and might make a commentary in relation to it. But as a professional investigator, a detective, you have to go in there with the mindset is you are dealing with the death of two people. Two people had their lives taken from them. And no matter what anybody is involved in, it doesn't give the right to another person to dispense their type of justice. Otherwise, we'll just have anarchy on the streets and people will do what they wish. And, the streets will be very unsafe with people carrying their firearms. So it's a sensitive situation, very, very sensitive. That's why it's so important to listen to what Christine has to say.
Yeah.
Very, very important.
It all comes back to Christine. There have been years she's been quiet. When she felt interest in catching Anthony's killers began to wane, and there was nothing she could do to get people interested again. And of course, it's been difficult to manage from her new home in the UK. She was no longer able to live in Dublin, where she often felt like she was suffocating in the aftermath of her son's death. But it also meant missing spending precious time with her parents and her sister before they died. That's just a small example of some of the repercussions of Anthony's death. Seeking justice for Anthony has always been her priority, something she can't let go of, even when loved ones have begged her to step away and simply learn to live with her grief.
I can be hard on myself because I don't feel I got the justice I should have for him. I'm let down by that.
And when did that kick in, that sense? Because that can't surely kick in immediately when you're still in that deep shock.
Tell you when it kicked in, as the years start going on, and I thought, man, you get how I experienced it was, you get your hopes up, and then your hopes is crushed. And as the years start going on, it does something to you, because you cannot say you haven't changed in all the grief, but yet you're still looking, you feel like you haven't done him proud because you didn't get the justice. That'll live with me because it is what it is.
And so it's like a year goes by, a second year goes by, a third year goes by, and you know that whoever has done this, has taken him from you and has taken his life, is still free.
Yeah, or even in prison. I knew that.
Yeah. But they're not, he was never serving.
No, the time for Anthony. And that was the bit I couldn't, it took me a long time to get my head around that. the calls stopped, if you get what I mean. I don't mean they stopped, but yeah, they came very few in between. Sometimes it'd go about 2 years.
Did that give you a bit of a break?
No, it kind of pissed me off.
Right.
I felt like they were forgetting it. And I felt like then if I'd done a radio show, and you can speak live, and if they said to me, when has the police been in contact? And I haven't heard from them for 2 years. Then you get the phone call. And that, you shouldn't have to say that. I'm not here to be against the police. But other people have moved in. The old ones have retired. And do you know what? I suppose they've got all that much work. I mean, that's the way it's gone, isn't it?
Did you get a sense in the beginning that there was this impetus, there was this desire to solve it? And did that feel like it fell away over the years?
Totally. After 2 years, I thought, well, I'm getting nowhere here. And then when it got to 5, well, every year, then I had to start protecting myself, saying to myself, don't get your hopes up, because that was the worst feeling, because you just felt just drowned in your own brain.
I think there's only a very small percentage of us who'd ever had to experience that horrific feeling that Christine describes, of drowning in your own brain. The passage of time has helped. She's leading a good life in a happy relationship with her husband's grandchildren to dote over, just as she would have doted over Anthony's kids had he been given the chance to have them. But talking to her, going to her home and spending time with her, you can sense those desperate feelings of helplessness, mixed in with frustration and real anger at times. That'll always be there until the men who murdered Anthony are caught. She finds it hard to talk about him. There's a nervousness and anxiousness there that requires a cigarette at regular intervals to help keep at bay. But she'll keep talking about him, because until his killers pay in some way for shooting her innocent and defenceless son in the head, she says that she will always feel she failed as a mum. Of course she didn't. Christine was a truly brilliant mother who did her very best for her boy, but it can be hard to persuade her otherwise. While she waits for something substantial to change so she can finally let go of those desperately unfair feelings of failure, she holds on to the happy times the two of them shared. When her funny and charming sandy-haired boy would feel the need to remind her he was no longer a child who needed to be watched over.
I mean, the last time we were together, we were at my cousin's 40th. And I was watching him, and then I brought him home in a taxi, and he used to say, Mom, like, leave me alone, I'm 20. Mean to show me, you know, all this. But now while he's out with me, I dropped him home, things like that. And then if I bumped into him in town, he'd be getting weak. And I'd say, fancy bumping into you here, you know, things like that. Yeah, they were good, you know. As I've always said, nobody can take the best memories I had. Unfortunately, I should have got to see more.
Caught in the Crossfire is produced by Crime World. Writer and producer Jane Finnegan. Producer Clodagh Meany. Audio editor Jason Malini. Art and graphics Enda Bulger. Executive producers Nicola Tallant and Ian Malini. I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.